Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to have a conversation about the state of our industry, this little board gaming hobby that we adore so much, and the Kickstarter marketplace that is connected or associated with it. We're going to have a conversation about shipping costs, about potential additional costs to you backers, and guaranteed delays like you've nearly never seen before. You see, there's a lot of stuff that's happening that, as far as a consumer goes, I wouldn't expect you to be aware of, because until I got into content creation, started paying attention to prototypes and having conversations with publishers, I had no idea about this side of this complex problem. And right now, across the world, freight and VAT taxes and shipping and paper costs are, they're upside down. They're numbers that we've never seen before. There's numbers that people who've been in this industry for 20, 30, 40 years have never had to deal with. We're talking 4 or 5 times inflation on certain single elements of the production run, on things like moving a cargo load from one dock into a holding facility for it to be shipped out to you, the consumer. And the more conversations I have, the more I dig into this topic, the more private messages and phone calls I've received from publishers both big and small in this industry, and numbers that have been shared with me, the more I come to realize that there's a lot of stuff I still don't know or understand. And so this is the beginning of that conversation. The beginning of doing my best to keep you, my audience, informed on what to expect, on what may and certainly is likely to happen, and more so on how to interact with and have conversations with publishers and creators and game designers and first-time Kickstarter successful projects. Learn how to have conversations with them that come from an informed position and are understanding of the complexities of this current day and age, the current struggles and challenges that they're facing. And if you don't want to watch this whole video, because I am going to be reading through some elements, I'm going to be digging into some facts and knowledge that I know, doing my best to explain things, please know 2 things. First off, I'll be monitoring the comments down below and following up with you as much as possible. I know a few other publishers are planning to do the same, and Board Game Co. and 3 Minute Board Games are planning on doing follow-up videos. One for the international market, because he's based, I believe, out of New Zealand, and then with Board Game Co. here in the States, he'll be doing a follow-up video addressing any of the concerns or questions you, the audience, have. So feel free to leave comments down below, letting us know your thoughts and letting us know your position or things that you'd like to hear more about. Because I cannot and will not be able to do it justice in this single video. And then, second off, the things that you should just be aware of. If you want the high notes, the main talking points of this video, first off, right now, production costs and specifically shipping costs, which means freight costs, are, 100 to 400 times more expensive than they would have been post-COVID, which means most of, if not every single project that quoted their numbers, how much it costs to fund and produce and get a game into your hands, every single one of them are either going to be facing one of 3 options. They're either going to have to delay the project and hope that prices go back to normal. They're going to have to consume an amazing amount of debt, either by paying it with another Kickstarter project or taking it out of their own pockets or coffers, meaning that they're not receiving any income for years of work or going into debt as a company themselves, putting them at risk. Or, like a few of them have already done, they might have to reach back out to you, the consumer, and ask for your continued support at $5 or $10 across the board to help negotiate and traverse these trying times. I think, honestly, that's an acceptable way for a publisher to go about this process, and I think it's going to be necessary. And so you, my audience, you can't be shocked by it. And I would encourage you to approach those conversations with a degree of grace and not be frustrated or hostile to a publisher that's been put in a situation not a single one could have predicted. Along with that, when it comes to the future of our space, we're going to see less and less big box games. We're going to see things condensed down into smaller, more approachable sizes because shipping and the potential cost for that many cargo loads right now is unattainable in our industry. We have a low margin industry, and so those costs cannot be absorbed by the game itself. It has to be passed on to the consumer. And then along with that, you're going to see delays. You're going to see delays across the board. I would encourage most small indie publishers, if you're a first-time publisher watching this, I would encourage you to share this video or draft your own version of this conversation and start that dialogue with your audience. Start expecting them or encouraging them to expect that there will be delays in your projects, because there has to be. And I'm not talking the normal delays that exist in Kickstarter. I mean, Kickstarter is known for estimates, not deadlines, but estimates of when a project might be finished. And then Chinese New Year and shipping and production and, development on a game, all of that lengthens that time frame until finally, a few months or years later, backers get their project. Well, right now, any Kickstarter that was funded at or before COVID that hasn't yet delivered, I would expect an increase of at least months, if not a year or more, on those projects getting into your hands. Because if a brand new publisher, I'm talking someone that raised $300,000, maybe $500,000 or less, tries to ship right now, any degree of profit, any degree of stability, any degree of leveraging for the next game will be entirely wiped out. That's just the state of things. So let's dig into this. Let's dig into this conversation that, like I said, I don't know enough about, but I've had a lot of conversations, I've been doing a lot of research, and I think it's time to start talking about it. What prompted this video? Well, I have seen consistently project after project over the last month or so begin the conversation with their audience talking about increased shipping costs. And a few big names have reached out to their community requesting or stating that they're going to have to charge more just to cover the freight costs because their project can't absorb it. I'm talking Assassin's Creed. I have a few pulled up here. I'm talking Necromolds, and I'm talking Wonderland's War. James Hudson just put out a video that's talking about this element in particular. And any of these sites that I'm mentioning are all public information. I'm not sharing any private information I've had in terms of conversations with publishers. I'm sharing data, and I'll have links to the Kickstarters if you want to do your own research and start digging into what the conversation is all about. Along with that, when we're talking about this space, we're also talking about the publishers that I've grown to know, and I've seen in a lot of private Facebook groups and even on some personal pages, publishers begin talking about and sharing messages to their community and to their degree of a fan base, expressing sympathy and challenge and stress in association with these elements. And so I began paying attention more and more and more, specifically a post from Patrick Leader from Leader Games. He put out on his personal Facebook profile and then shared it publicly, and I'll read it verbatim. I'm writing this on behalf of smaller publishers out there. Recently, prices to ship from factory to depot, typically a shipping container or part of a container on the ocean, have skyrocketed. We are looking at 300 to 600% increases. There is no way any of us could have budgeted for this. We were fortunate we were able to absorb the loss and continue shipping at great cost. Some small publishers have decided to wait out the price hike, which is a reasonable assumption. COVID-19 is still driving a lot of this price increase, and as things soothe out again, we should see a drop in prices. Please be patient with smaller publishers. They're having to make some hard decisions right now. Your game will still arrive at some point, and punishing them for it now is not going to help. I can assure you, they are already punishing themselves. And anyone that's watched my channel knows I do a lot of work with smaller publishers. I have a sweet spot for the indie space, for how scrappy we are, for how we have a community of fans and creators that are really super conjoined and combined. We love this hobby. We're passionate about it at our own expense, at our own cost, at our own time. And so I have struggled for the last 2 years of running Quackalope to navigate the space of indie publishers, to share their content, to express gratitude for the work they do, and also do my best to communicate to them publicly and privately that this is an industry with tight and low margins, and the vast majority of first-time Kickstarter projects do not make money. And I'm not talking right now with the shipping increase or the struggles happening in the world economic trade system. I'm talking before, when times were good, when COVID hadn't existed, when money was flowing. I'm saying still then, even then, most small publishers, most first-time publishers do not make a return on their investment of time, resources, financial investment until the second or third Kickstarter launch or second or third printing of their title. They're doing so because they love this space and because they're pursuing an opportunity for a career, for a dream job. They're pursuing an opportunity to create something that you get to the table, that you love and can play around your family, and because they had a bug in them that made them want to create. So, those posts like that from Patrick Leader have spurred a desire to understand this space. And so I put a post up on my Facebook page asking for publishers, privately or publicly, to start communicating with me about our industry, about shipping costs, about what exactly is happening right now. And it's not looking good. So let's start with a thing that I keep mentioning. Let's start with shipping. We're going to talk mail versus freight. And what a lot of you, the backers, and myself don't understand is that the shipping tag that you see at the bottom line of your Kickstarter pledge, that additional cost, isn't actually the freight cost. That additional cost is going to be the cost to get the game through UPS or USPS or FedEx from the warehouse to your door. And those prices have fluctuated, and they've gone up a bit, but we're talking 5-10%. And so on a consumer market, you're not seeing a drastic increase in those costs unless you're trying to ship overseas, which most of us don't. However, when it comes to freight or it comes to cargo, that is usually a cost that is absorbed by the Kickstarter project itself, meaning it's built into the line items, and it is part of what they're factoring into the price of the game, dividing it by every single backer, and sometimes eating into their profit margin, eating into what they have to pay themselves to continue producing games, because this isn't just a hobby full of fun toys. This is a job and a career and oftentimes a mortgaged house for a lot of first-time creators. Well, 2 or 3 that I know of specifically. This isn't something where you could spend 7 years of your life or 3 years of your life making no income at all. And so they built that into the line item. What those freight costs are is taking the game from the manufacturer over to the fulfillment center. And those costs are the costs that have increased 4-5 times. That means if you had a game that, was going to be $10 to take a cargo unit from one location to another so it could be start being sent out to your backers, you're now looking at $40 or $50. That's not bad for a single unit, but when you're looking at a large shipment, 2,000 units of the same product, you're thinking and talking numbers that the line items, the profit margin of our industry just can't bear. So if a publisher reaches out and communicates to you, the audience, that they're going to have to charge more for shipping than they initially expected, please be gracious in this area. It's not shipping such as UPS. They're not cutting a profit off the top of whatever they're charging you. They're oftentimes, and even still within this context, eating some large degree of the cost themselves in an attempt to get the games to your door. Publishers want nothing more than to get the games in front of you. It's important to remember in this. They want you to love their games. They want you to play them. They've done all of this so that you can sit down and enjoy their title and hopefully rate it high on BGG and come back for the next one. This isn't a one-off, one-show, walk away with $1 million type of industry. It's not how it works. I don't think it's worked for anyone like that. So, shipping versus freight. Let's Let's go into where those prices have changed, and I'll do so specifically talking about Assassin's Creed. Now, again, this is an update that was posted on their page, so I'm not sharing anything that hasn't been made public. Freight costs. When we opened the Pledge Manager in 2019, the total freight cost for Assassin's Creed was estimated at $34,000. In April 2021, the new quote increased to approximately $105,000. Currently, our games are still not on the ships, and the actual cost will only be determined on the day of boarding. When the freight, your cargo, gets placed onto a ship, you get sent a bill for whatever that day rate was or whatever it was that you were able to negotiate and agree with. Yesterday, we did a simulation using Freightos.com, an online freight booking platform. Here are the results for ocean freight only if the game could ship today. USA, 60,000. Europe, close to 80,000. Canada, close to 20,000. The estimated total, if it could ship today, is 158,175, up from 34,000 just under or over a year and a half ago. Those are the numbers we're looking at. That is the type of cost and the type of expense that no company, not even the biggest in our space, can bear the burden of. Assassin's Creed continued to say that it comes down to two options. Either we bankrupt and go out of business, or we pass a bit of this cost that no one could have foreseen onto hundreds and thousands of backers, disseminating the cost from 105 or 150,000 additional dollars from one company to $5, $10, $15 from a variety of individuals who are all invested in getting the game in front of them. It's not a good situation to be in. Writing that update, looking at those numbers, and having to tell your community you've got one of a few options is not a position anyone would ask to be in, and not a position that a bit of profit would justify making. So, that's shipping versus freight. That's digging into what's happening right now. Now, I mentioned that we are a low-margin industry, and that also factors into this in a really important way. You see, our industry only has a profit margin of, I venture to say, 15, maybe 25% on games. And that's what a company is able to cut to pay their employers, pay their employees, pay themselves, pay the designer, have space where they can produce and start working towards the next game. That's capital. That's what they're able to use to continue being a legitimate company. And that profit margin is really small when it comes to our space, especially when you start not going direct to consumer through Kickstarter and you start disseminating those costs across various other retail platforms. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so when it comes to freight, if freight is increasing at 100 to 500%, you're looking at situations where your profit margin gets completely eaten up and more money beyond your profit margin gets eaten up. Now, why can other companies function with these freight costs? Well, there's a lot of companies out there that have really, really insanely good profit margins, meaning what they're selling the consumer is 800 times, or I don't know the numbers officially, but it's some ridiculous degree of profit. It costs me 10 cents to make a lollipop, and I'm selling it to the consumer for $20. That type of margin. When you have so much room to play and you're making so much money, the shipping costs go up, you're able to pay them. You're able to just book it, because by the time your product gets to the shore, you can pass that on to the consumer, and you're still making a ton of money. That's not how our industry works. That's not what any publisher is prepared to do, and in an attempt to keep prices reasonable and keep games accessible, publishers will sacrifice their profit margin with the hope that the next title, or the next reprint, or the next expansion is where they'll be able to make some money. Right now, that sacrifice profit margin is coming back to hurt every single publisher in our space. So, what's the reality of the situation? It's really, really hard to predict. The odds are shipping costs are never going to return to normal. You can look at the freight index. I'll link this down below as well. There's a ranking showing this year versus last year and the percentage increase. the bottleneck that has happened where China is shipping out freight and they're not returning to the ocean lines, where cargo ships are waiting off docks that are currently backed up because of low employee numbers, because of the COVID outbreak, and still the economic recovery and struggle that we're facing in regards to that. Everything right now is bottlenecked. And the US dollar is currently suffering inflation when it comes to other region markets. And so this whole cacophony, and I haven't even touched into manufacturing costs or the paper shortage in China or all the other little nuanced items that are making everything more expensive. I haven't even began to touch on any of those elements, and I don't think I realistically can in this video. So what's the reality of the situation? Well, like I said, game prices are not going to go down. Shipping prices are not going to go down. In fact, I think we'll see more and more small box games. We're going to see more game trying to fit into a smaller package. And for the big box games that exist out there, your shipping costs are going to go up higher and higher. And for those of you in the international community that are dealing with VAT taxes, that's a whole nother struggle. For those of you that aren't aware, VAT tax is value-added tax, and basically it means that at every stage of production, there's a tax that's added to the product that you recoup by taxing the next stage of production until finally the consumer pays that. So wood, when it first comes into the lumber mill, has a 10-cent tax. Then, when it goes from the lumber mill to the manufacturer as component bits, like meeples, you have a 20-cent tax that the lumber mill keeps 10 cents of and sends the other 10 cents to the government. Then, when it goes from meeples into a board game that starts being shipped out, it has a 40-cent tax, where the people who are shipping out and manufacturing the board game, they keep 20 cents of it, recouping their cost, and send the other 20 cents to the government. Then, when it gets to the distributor or it gets to the local store, you have another tax, where they keep a percentage and send the rest to the government until finally it gets to you, the consumer, where you have to pay whatever that value-added tax was, sometimes getting as high as 20% in different European regions. I don't know enough to really talk about this, but that is a situation, again, where no one could have fully predicted the degree to which governments were going to pass regulations and laws around different tax profiles, and the European state of things at the moment is a little bit hard to navigate. Publishers are dealing with that, consumers are dealing with that, and there's really no good solution. I understand the frustration on both sides, and again, there's really no good solution. So what are we going to see in this space? Smaller games, larger games that cost more, that potentially still have to distribute some additional shipping cost, and have to deal with the issues of VAT when it comes to international shippers. I'm honestly not sure if the US market suffers from this. I know it's not something that I get charged extra, but it may still impact the total cost of the game when it comes to kind of the final line items. Along with that, there's a lot of publishers that are currently predicting we're going to see companies go out of business in a very real and realistic fashion. We're talking big companies that are struggling. We're talking small indie publishers that will never be back for another release. Now, we thought COVID was bad. Well, COVID was bad because it sort of led to this. We're not through it yet. The world's starting to open up. Some stores are coming back. I know a lot of our small retail marketplace has suffered dramatically, and now it's onto the publisher's turn. It'll probably be deep into 2022 before we even see a degree of relief from this issue, and so don't be expecting this to resolve itself over the next few months. As the world opens up for you, the gamer, please understand it hasn't opened up for the publishers. And if you care about the company that's producing your game, please extend a bit of grace to them in this conversation. Expect them to be communicative. Expect them to share what they're dealing with and share their numbers. Feel free to challenge them and communicate with them with what you'd rather they do, whether that's charge the consumer more to get the game to you faster, whether that's wait and delay until prices stabilize in some form, or run another project in order to help fulfill both. I think that's probably a terrible idea. Don't do that. But whatever you do, please communicate with a publisher in a respectful and educated manner, just like I expect them to do the same to you. If a publisher disappears or doesn't actively communicate, understand there could be a degree of mental health and stress associated with that, but still, in a charitable and reasonable way, reach out to them in an understanding manner. We, as a community, if we want to see publishers we care about survive and weather this situation, if we want to see the games we're excited about made and arrive at our doorstep, we have to take some role in not only understanding, but also engaging with this, our space. We're not a giant multi-billion-dollar industry. We're just not. Most of the companies that I work with personally are small teams of 3 to 10. Quite a lot of them are one-person operations shipping games out of their garage and scraping every penny they can while they still work full-time jobs on the side with a dream of something bigger and better in the future. I get that. I admire that hustle, and before I was a content creator, I had no idea that that was the reality. So, approach this situation with grace and understand, if you want your favorite companies to survive, you're going to have to potentially do your part. So, that's the conversation. That's what I have to say. I think there's a lot more that needs to be gone over, and I'll be doing follow-up videos, answering comments down below, and of course, Board Game Co. is going to be producing a video alongside this one, addressing any concerns that you, the audience, might have. So let us know. I'm sure I didn't go over everything I was supposed to. And let me just check my document real quick to see if there's anything else. Links to a lot of the articles and resources that I was using to find out are going to be down below, including a link to my personal Facebook post where you can see some of the conversations that I was having with industry folk. Whatever the case, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. Act with kindness and understanding. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.